Welcome to Mick and the Psychic, where we leave no stone unturned as we explore all things outside the apparent physical realm.
There is no intent to teach or make you believe or disbelieve anything. It is just a safe space to listen and explore with us.
So for this next episode, you have permission to open your heart and mind as you join myself and Xavier on this deep dive into the unknown
world. So what we're bringing in, what we're attracting, such as relationships, the relationship we have with our own pleasure, our own sexuality. It's all stemming from that sex center through the fire element.
Buckle up, everybody, because today we have Ava Ashe on the show. Ava is an authentic Tantra practitioner, licensed hypnotherapy practitioner, and certified Tantra and shamanic movement guide. Ava bridges a gap of spirituality and sexuality when working with the subconscious mind, science, and spiritual embodiment for holistic healing. Through result-orientated, tangible means, she quickly and effectively guides men, women, and couples from anywhere in the world to reclaim the joy of their sexuality and pleasure, with a desire to unleash radical authenticity with taboo social and spiritual norms. Apparently, this sexpert is breaking all the rules. I don't know what rules there are, but I like that you're trying to break them. That's great. It's great to have you on.
And I love.
Thank you.
Asked her how to pronounce her last name, and you said it wrong.
Did I?
Ashe.
Ashe, it's okay, totally fine.
Yep, all right.
Oh,
I have to address it because he'll be like, damn it, I just
amateur hour. I love the fact that I edit these episodes, so I'll listen to the start again and just cringe my way into it. But I thought there was going to be cringing with this episode, but I thought it was going to be because it's like you're talking sexuality and pleasure, but that's okay. We started it early.
I'm sure she's given you already. Oh, dear. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This is just beautiful. And we're very excited to have you because we know Tantra and sexuality and pleasure, even self-pleasure, it seems like such a taboo subject. So the first thing I want to ask you is, so many people, they hear the word Tantra and I think they think, well, actually I asked a couple of people leading up to this, when I say Tantra, what do you think of? And they just said, sex and spirituality? Like that's all they know. So can you elaborate a little bit or a lot? What is Tantra, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sex and spirituality as an aspect of Tantra, that's totally correct. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe where we start to get a little bit mixed up is because a lot of the Tantra that we see in the West is Neo-Tantra based. Neo-Tantra is normally very sexually oriented, where a lot of the teachings are sexual only, or, they're not stemming from any type of lineage or any type of practice in particular. It's kind of a blend of both, usually stemming from more of the Hindu traditions. So you'll see a lot of Neo-Tantra practitioners teaching things like feminine and masculine embodiment and things like that. Now, a little bit different from what I do as an authentic Tantra practitioner is that I work with lineage-based Tantra. So I work with Tibetan Buddhist Tantra and the Tibetan 5 elemental practices for holistic healing. And that incorporates sexual and non-sexual practices. So that's where it's, we have a whole nother flavor. We have a whole nother medicinal means to the practices and tools that I'm sharing. And then it also encompasses things like science and the mind and, where our belief patterns are stemming from. And so just a little bit of a difference there. What I'm teaching is a whole holistic modality for holistic sexual healing, not just in pleasure-based sexuality, but encompassing our entire lives.
Wow.
So you talk about healing. So is this specifically being designed, like going way back, thousands of years? Was this specifically designed because of being issues with just issues with sexuality, or is it using sexuality to heal people from things that are more deep seated?
Mm-hmm. Well, going back through the lineage, I believe that the practices themselves arose through pure consciousness. So the founder of the lineage, the Shangpa lineage of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, which is woven into Authentic Tantra, was founded by a Black woman named Naguma thousands of years ago. And so through time, these transmission of the practices, the sexual practices specifically, are feminine oriented. So you're getting the feminine transmission that has not been manipulated because it's a secret lineage or oral based lineage. So you can't go and you can Google about the lineage itself, but in terms of the practices, especially when the Tibetan 5 elements started to weave into this lineage in particular, those aren't things that are written down, because to this day, which is very, very special and unique, it's oral based transmission.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not that many people would practice it then, because like, I mean, the idea of writing something down and sharing it is that more and more people can just learn it and teach it. Whereas if it's passed down, you have to know someone.
Right. Well, it's a brand new transmission of lineage-based Tantra to the West, yes. And there's another thing I want to add to that. It's not written down necessarily so that all these people can't learn it. It's so that it doesn't become manipulated by patriarchy and religious institution.
That's never happened though. What a ridiculous thing to say. Show me the evidence of that ever happening.
Yeah, so that's why this is so special and so unique and so powerful to be teaching. And that's just one aspect of Authentic Tantra. Like I said, all these other aspects of, anatomy, science, all of that good stuff has also been weaved into this holistic modality. So yeah, really, really powerful stuff.
I feel the sense of it being more powerful because of if it's delivered orally, verbally, it's a vibration and the sound of the voice and energy as it's getting passed on, which feels way more feminine in general, or that's just what I'm feeling as you're speaking about it.
Absolutely.
Storytelling is very important, and storytelling is so special in so many countries and in lineages, and it's a beautiful way to share knowledge.
Yeah, you kind of just hit the nail on the head there, because when we work directly with the Tibetan 5 elements, they each have their own unique quality. They have their own flavor. There's so many medicinal properties to each one of the elements that we're working with. And we're also working with sound, the seed syllables, and we're working with visualization. So that's where it becomes tantric, is that we're weaving our external reality with our internal reality. Yeah.
Before we go into what that might be, what it looks like, because it kind of sounds like it sounds a little bit meditative as well. But what are those 5 elements that you've put? Are you able to summarize those 5 elements for us of those Tibetan, elements?
Yeah, so
Cool,
the Tibetan 5 elements, working from the sex center as fire, and then at the navel is earth. We have space at the heart, which encompasses all of them. Space it doesn't have any form, right? And then we have air at the throat and water at the top of the head. So as we start to work directly with the energy body, it starts to stem out into our physical body. It starts to stem out into our nervous system, our thought patterns, right? And then outward through the world. So what we're bringing in, what we're attracting, such as relationships, the relationship we have with our own pleasure, our own sexuality. It's all stemming from that sex center through the fire element, where a lot of times what I see in clients, for example, something like sexual dysfunction, if we go back and back and back, right, it's stemming directly from the energy body itself. So there could be a blockage, a breakage, a leak in the energy itself, that, right, when we work with the 5 elemental practices, it starts to heal, it starts to recalibrate, and then it stems outward from there.
Awesome. So it's those 5 elements within the body's energy system. And are you balanced? Are you looking, do you need to see if they're balanced, or like what people do with chakras? Is it similar to that? Or how do you know when something's out?
Well, you get a pretty good idea of where someone is at when you do a simple intake. Like, what do you feel about this? What are the symptoms arising physically, mentally, emotionally? And then very naturally, right, when we start to work with the elements, it starts to balance it out and purify. So, you know, purification is not always a comfortable thing. It can be quite painful, but because we're talking about Tantra here, it can also be quite pleasurable at the same time.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
what does that entail then when you say purification? Can be painful, pleasurable? Like, people are like, what the heck are you doing to me? Is what I'm thinking, that people listening are, what do you mean? What happens?
Right. So, you know, when I work with clients, they're in charge of their own energy body and what's happening, right? So it's not like I'm going in and fixing the thing and purifying the stuff, right? It does take consistency. It takes that effort to be like, yes, like I want these tools to transform my life, right? So I obviously teach sexual and non-sexual practices. The Tibetan 5 elements can be meditation practices on their own. And then as clients progress, they can start to use those sexually in different ways. There's partner practices and all sorts of different things when we're talking just about the 5 elements alone. So adding that sexual energy on top, right, starts to infiltrates, I think, even to more of an extent, right? Because our sexual energy is so powerful. You know, layering pleasure on top of what's arising for us then gives us that ability to break it up and let it dissolve.
So the pleasure that you have, does that amplify the sexual energy or the sexual power?
Yeah, so pleasure isn't just sexual pleasure, right? So many of us, when I ask this question, what do you think of pleasure as being? Most people will answer sex. That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. When in reality, when we start to weave in the senses, our sensory experience into what we're constantly feeling into pleasure, that is what really enhances the not only the bodily experience and our ability to feel pleasure, right? Because a lot of us are in a trauma state where we don't even realize we're numbing out. It actually has effects on our nervous system, on the subconscious mind, and then all the way to a cellular level where we can start to actually rewire the DNA through pleasure. And pleasure has all these beautiful benefits, right? We release all these different chemicals and hormones into the body when we allow ourselves to experience pleasure just in everyday things. And then sexual pleasure obviously has even more of those beautiful chemicals. And just to put things into perspective a little bit more, in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, we believe that every orgasm is a glimpse of enlightenment. So it has that power and that capacity for us to actually, right, fall more into consciousness.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
You'll love the idea of enlightenment. That sounds amazing. And when you was mentioning pleasure, the first thing actually popped into my mind, which really surprised me, was eating like a really big fresh strawberry or something like that. That's something you really enjoy the taste of. So I was thinking of pleasure of taste and then sensation, because there's so many other kinds of things that people can enjoy. What are some other common things that people might, when they've moved past the sexual part, other things that people might, so other people can think that are listening or watching, what they might experience as pleasure they don't realize will be classified as pleasure?
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention, it's not about moving past the sexual pleasure. It's about being able to incorporate pleasure no matter what type it is, right?
Beautiful.
So sexual pleasure will always be there. I do not believe that we can be sexually or fully human beings without feeling the extent of our sexuality and being able to harness that medicine, right? So I think that's a lifetime thing that we can continuously grow from. But in terms of just everyday pleasure, we have emotional pleasures, right? When you love to read a book, or even consciously watching Netflix can be an emotional pleasure, right? As long as we're like not numbing out and just using it as a distraction, right? So it's literally just this flip where we start to view our reality through a different lens, right? We could be doing the same actions with a completely different intention, with a completely different awareness behind it. So yeah, we have the senses, right? That's how we start to pull in the pleasure that we're experiencing is directly through the senses first, right? What am I feeling? What am I seeing? What am I tasting, right? What am I seeing? What am I smelling, right? All of that. And just weaving that in can enhance and allow us to fall even deeper into these other types of pleasure, sexual pleasure especially. And it's really crazy where when I work with people and I'll ask them like, how have you experienced pleasure today? And it's like, well, I went for a run. But it's like, are you experiencing pleasure from that? Or is it because you think that right? It's more of this flip through the lens, the view of why are they doing that in the first place? Are they experiencing pleasure? Or is it because they need to work their body out because that's what they think they should be doing?
Exactly.
So yeah.
They might have explained feeling pleasure from going from the run. You could explain that I really enjoyed the exhilaration and the wind blowing on me, on the sweat on my body. I felt like tingly and refreshed and amazing. Like that's the pleasure, not the actual job of going for the run.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. It sounds simpler than I thought. Like it's more about being mindful and present and in the moment, and like you said, conscious of everything you do. Because what's the point of being here and having an experience in life if you're just numbing out and just going through the motions, eating food while watching something, you're not focusing maybe on either. So taking your time, really immersing yourself in whatever the experience is and feel everything.
Yeah. And gently, easily, like just because, you are becoming more aware of what's going on in your internal, external reality, and you slip up or you numb out again doesn't mean anything, right? It just simply means that you're becoming more aware of what's happening. There's no shame. There's no guilt behind it. If you want to eat a piece of chocolate cake, like go for it. That's really a really big thing, because what happens is we'll start to reinstill those belief patterns once again, right? If we make ourselves shame and guilt, and that's where, the subconscious mind obviously starts to come into play too.
I have, because we're talking pleasure, I have a question around that, the function of pleasure. Are you saying that the function of pleasure is a way for you to focus your attention onto a deeper meaning of what you're doing? Because I guess with sex, you could argue from an evolutionary perspective that sex is pleasurable to encourage people to have sex so that they will have children, because having children is pretty hard and annoying. So like pleasure, sex being pleasurable means that they'll have sex and have children. So it's just like really sex is pleasurable so that you have children. You're saying that the pleasure side isn't just about making someone want to do something, it focuses in on something higher or more spiritual happening. Is that what the pleasure is doing?
Absolutely, yes.
If you consciously do it, I guess. You could unconsciously, that's not going to focus in on anything. So with Tantra, like focusing.
It takes so much consistency and awareness of what's happening. And also, it's not like we get to a certain point and we just stay in consciousness forever, right? I don't necessarily believe that. Our bodies and our subconscious mind are constantly interacting with one another. They're sending each other messages, right? All the time. And we're not consciously usually aware of it. So what pleasure does is it starts to peel back the layers of like what's in between, right? What's in between the subconscious and what's happening in the body? How can I learn from this? How can I heal holistically from this, right? And then from there, our DNA and nervous system starts to heal. And then from that space, we start to feel like we're connected to our God selves, our Buddha nature, our, something that's, more it's our truth, right? It's our divinity in a sense, right? But that doesn't mean we're going to stay in this bliss and ecstasy all the time, right? Bliss or ecstasy can be simply as shifting the view of how we're perceiving our life and being able to live from that space of awareness and just allowing ourselves to have the fullest experience that we possibly can through the body.
I don't want to ask too many questions. I'm sorry. You go. Have you got something else?
No, always. So I was just thinking, so a lot of my clients, I seem to attract clients that have maybe in the past they've had negative sexual experiences or trauma and things like that. So and it could just be like patterns like that, or just in their current life and relationships, there's a stagnation. I help them work on their inner god or goddess and bring out their best selves or that beautiful, juicy energy. I see it like a flame. And when it's a bit dull, it's like a little pilot light. And as we work on it and heal and we bring it up, and it turns into like this big flame that goes through all the chakras up to the heart chakra. Oh, my connection's unstable. Can you still hear me?
You moved past
Yes.
it. Yeah.
That's good.
I moved past it. Good. So is this something that most of your clients would come to see you for, is helping heal from wanting that connection with themselves and trauma and understanding their bodies so they can actually release and be comfortable in that space sexually, but just for themselves? Like, is that a common theme for your clients?
Absolutely. A lot of people come to me simply because they feel unfulfilled in their sex lives, and they know or can feel that there's something else there that can feel more fulfilling and more alive. I also have people come to me because they have a fear or sexual anxiety. A lot of women experience that. And then you have the flip side of a lot of men who are experiencing a huge amount of sexual dysfunction, which is just on the high in Western society right now, where so much sexual dysfunction is happening. But it all stems back to us, the similar pattern of these beliefs and structures. And then, there's one part of trauma that I just want to mention too, is that when we talk about trauma, we're not just talking about our lives and the trauma we've experienced, but our ancestral trauma, our generational trauma, even past life trauma. So there's a lot that we can work with, probably for the rest of our lives and many lifetimes. And
good. We won't run out. We won't run out of trauma. Thank God. There's plenty to go around.
And sexual tantra is a means to, I would say, rapidly and effectively start to dissolve a lot of that trauma, as well as working directly with the subconscious mind through things like hypnotherapy is extremely beneficial. But we have to work somatically through the body to dissolve trauma, period.
Wow. So when you say, because you've mentioned a couple of times, like sex being a medicine. So this is a way to physically work through trauma or heal from it, or like how does sex work as a medicine?
Yeah. So we have, what's coming up for me is when we work with pleasure directly, right? We're starting to, it doesn't have to be necessarily physical touch, right? But then we work directly with sexual pleasure, and that's obviously going to start involving things like touch and our sensory experience. So again, not only are you releasing all these different chemicals, but because you have awareness of what's going on in the energy body, then you can harness that. So for whatever is arising in your sexual practice, if you're having sex or if you're in a self-pleasure practice and things are coming up for you, then you already have that awareness of your energy body saying, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I can do about it, right? So that's what sometimes Tantra gets a little twisted, is a lot of people will just start directly with the sexual practices. And in my opinion, that is incredibly dangerous. It is not extremely tangible for someone. It can be overwhelming, and it's too much for the energy body. A lot of times it can reenact even a trauma response if we just go gung-ho into the sexual practices, right? So I always start with the awareness piece of working again with the subconscious reframing, working with how we view pleasure in your life, working with the energy body through the Tibetan 5 elements. And then we get to layer the sexual practices on top. And then we get to amplify it from that space.
Beautiful.
Excellent. So it's not like all sex is medicine, because sex can be negative as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, two people could be having the same experience, right? But it could be perceived totally different for one person than the other, right? So it really differs person to person. Yeah.
Exactly. And it just made me think of like your energy and who you give it to, where you put it. So do you have an opinion? I'm sure you do, or something you can explain to do with that about who, you know, being mindful of who you share your sexual energy with, I would say, especially in although at the same time I don't feel like being empowered and having the freedom to do what you want without being judged by anybody is also important. So maybe it's a mindset thing. If you're seen as promiscuous, for example, I know with women it's a bit more taboo if they have many partners, but for men it seems to be like okay and acceptable. So yeah, some people talk about just spreading your energy with when you have superficial relationships, or is that okay? Can you do something to keep your energy, how do I explain this, within yourself, and it's okay to be with many partners because that's empowering and that's what you want to do? On the flip side of somebody who does it not consciously because that's how they're feeling like important by being with many partners and looking for it. What's the difference? You know what I'm trying to explain?
Yeah. Well, no, that makes total sense.
Good.
Yeah, that's a really tricky question because, man, I think that's a tricky question because we can be unaware of when we're experiencing a trauma response and then spiritually bypassing it as, well, I'm just a sexually free feminine body and I just want to share that with everyone, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's true. More often than not, that's probably not what's happening. It's the same for a lot of people now that I see in the spiritual community starting to practice open relationships,
Yes.
polyamory. There's nothing wrong with those things. It can be so incredibly beneficial and healing, but there's very few people that are meant for those types of relationships, right?
I've seen the same thing. They think it's amazing, but then bang, crash.
Yeah.
It didn't work out, but they thought it was perfect at the time. But I guess it's a lesson regardless of how it works out.
Right. No shame, no guilt. Like you have to have experiences in order to figure it all out. Right. But again, like trauma works in super funny ways because you can be so convinced, right, that this is completely the right thing. And then a moment later, it's like, holy shit, I'm like having this response in my body and it doesn't feel good anymore. What's happening? Right. So again, it's just about really, really being able to work with your own energy body, your own sexual pleasure before you start sharing that with everybody else, right? Or even a partner, right? When I started this path, I didn't have the tools or the emotional capacity to start to share that with my partner right away. I had to go into my own self-pleasure practice. I had to start using those elements, using all of the things that I was learning at the time. And then it was months later where I started to invite my partner into that. Because what happens is if we start to force it, right, it can, again, it can reenact a traumatic response in us, and then we close down again. The thing with vulnerability is that we have to do it slowly, like a little bit and then just pull back, a little bit more and then pull back, a little bit more and then pull back into yourself, right? Because vulnerability is extremely scary. And that's where a lot of people will start to shut down once again. It's like, oh, I don't want to go there. That's too much. And that's okay. But first, start to feel that vulnerability, that openness, that control through your own sexual energy, your own energy body first, before you go and start sharing that with everybody else. I think that's really important.
Beautifully explained.
Requires obviously a lot of honesty then though as well. I mean, you're teaching people how to be aware and obviously heightening their awareness in what do they feel in the body, what is this pleasure, and there's obviously tools and ways of being able to increase your awareness so that you're consciously doing these things. But that would take obviously a lot of honesty. You talk about spiritual bypassing, or we do that unconsciously, and sometimes it's easier to not be honest and just go, yep, that's great, I'm I meditate or do this. How do you people that come to see you, have they gone through a certain amount of work with themselves first, I guess, to be at a point like ready for change or ready to take on what you have to share with them through Tantra?
Yeah, I would say from my experience, there has to be a willingness, right? Or it starts to be me, the one trying to convince you that this works and that you need to keep doing it, right? So yes, there definitely has to be that that space where it's like, I want this so bad to feel so sexually alive in my body. I want to heal holistically and put in the time and the commitment into transforming my life, right? So a lot of what happens is that sometimes people can be so ready, but what's holding them back is those subconscious beliefs and patterns. So what I'll do sometimes, if someone is having a difficult time just going gung-ho and really diving into the mentorship program that I offer, I'll offer them a transformational therapy session first, where we'll go into the subconscious and start to reframe those belief patterns, because they can be so deeply ingrained. It doesn't matter how conscious you are about how bad you want it, right? It's like, it's just not happening, right? Your body's not on board. Your thoughts are all over the place, right? Even though it's pushing you towards that. So coming back into the subconscious reframing, and a lot of what I do is it's hypnotherapy based, but it also incorporates things like neuroplasticity, CBT, and all that really good stuff. So at the end of this pretty intensive session, there can be a lot of change happening already. And then maybe a few weeks later, a couple weeks later, things are already shifting in their life. They're already feeling more, experiencing more pleasure, and then they want to go deeper. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
I was just thinking, so I know I have lots of, being a woman who I've come out of a marriage where I wasn't that happy. Like, how do I explain? For many, many reasons. And I know that, and I'm lucky, I found a perfect partner that I connect with now that I didn't before. I know lots of other spiritual women who in my experience, women seem to become more aware of the spirituality, wanting to learn and connect, and they become psychics and healers and all that stuff more than the men. So there might be, for every 10 women I know, there's one man or less that are on the same journey. And so these women most of them I know are also single and having trouble finding a male partner that they can connect with, because they know there's more, and they know they can connect sexually and spiritually with somebody. And they're looking for that. So, and some of them are in relationships with their partners and they would love to have a deeper connection. Is there any advice? Because I know you said you need to be willing. So they would come to classes and you might have all the women coming and not as many men. Is there any advice you can give to the women listening, and anyone else having the same difficulty with a partner, man or woman or non-binary, whatever, that how they can maybe introduce some tantric practices that might not be so woo-woo for their partners to understand if they're not in that space, just a way that they can consciously connect or explain it to them in a way that might be more acceptable to their partner, so they can understand of how they could maybe have a more intimate connection as a couple. Doesn't have to be sexual, just have those some moments where they can get what they need from their partner and teach them something.
Yeah, such a profound question. Yes, relationship is I think our greatest teacher. And first, I just want to say that I have similar women who come to me. We have to work directly with her energy first, right? And then as she starts to become more sexually sovereign on her own, saying, my pleasure is my fucking responsibility, right?
Yep. I love that.
Right? She becomes a magnet to her lover, right? And he's instantly more drawn into her, or, if she, So there's definitely that energetic pull that's happening, because a lot of times I see in relationship, and I was the same way. It's like, babe, I want to connect. Babe, I want to eye gaze. Babe, let's do this, right? But it's like, hold on a second. Am I doing that with myself? Am I sexually sovereign right now? Or I'm trying to pull that pleasure from my partner, right? And he can feel that. That repels. That would repel anyone, right? It's not personal. It's that energetic thing that's happening, right? So the more that she becomes sexually sovereign in her own body, it's like, yes, I can experience this connection, this deep intimacy, and this amazing pleasure within my own body that I now get to invite my partner into, right? And he'll probably be more willing and ready to do so because her energy is saying yes, right?
Beautiful. And
she's also going to need to, again, work with whatever stuff is coming up at the forefront of, like, what is the shame, the guilt, the patterns behind my own sexuality, and start to dissolve those first, right? And that can take some time. An easy way to start inviting your partner into that space is just being playful about it, being flirty about it, right? It doesn't have to be like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and this is how I'm feeling, and this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I expect from you, right? That's not sexy, right? No matter who you are going to respond to someone way more who's flirty and fun, and, just having this kind of dynamic conversation, right? And a simple thing that you can invite him into is just eye gazing, just, can we just lay here and breathe together, right? Can we just stop the sexual play for a moment and just be with this energy, right? And she doesn't even have to verbally say that, right? She could just do it, right?
See, yeah,
right?
How long you can keep the connection for, and just play with it. Yeah. That's so
it doesn't.
That's the first thing I was doing with my partner, and it was so weird to me. We just lay in bed and stare at each other, and I'd get embarrassed and look away because I wasn't used to someone looking at me so much, and hours. And then there'd be tears and stuff, and I'm sharing. But
Yeah.
yeah, so where is this all coming from? This is really emotional, and I don't know what's going on here, but it was amazing. And so that just made the connection that much stronger. Yeah. I love that you said working on yourself. So that means the people listening, they know they can go and do the work on themselves without their partner, and it's okay, because when they get to know their own bodies and feeling really good about themselves, it'll just vibrate out. And that makes sense, because I say it in a very different way, more casual way, when say women want more romance in their lives, and I would tell them, don't go wait for your partner to buy you flowers if you want romance. If you want to be surrounded by romance, buy yourself some damn flowers, because then you're going to attract the energy of that, and you're actually more likely to attract more similar experiences, because you're saying, this is what I love and deserve, and I'd like this in my life. You're responsible. You can go have a bath and light candles and make it seductive and romantic if that's the vibe you want. You don't need anyone else to go do it for you.
Yeah. And, partnership can be, yeah.
Love it.
And partnership is so, so beautiful, right? So like even saying to your partner, like, I love when you do this.
Yes.
They're going to do more of it, right?
Exactly.
They're going to do more of it.
Yeah. Just explain what you actually enjoy. That makes sense. Yeah.
I love when you tell me how much you love the way my body looks. Mm-hmm. I love when you pick flowers up for me. I love when you hold me in the mornings right before you go off to work, right? They're going to do more of that because they know it makes you feel good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It ticks a lot of boxes as well, because it makes you think about what you do love about things, and actually gives your partner a chance to like do that and enjoy it with you
without having to read your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like the Tantra. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just saying it just helps you verbalize and practice explaining what you like as well. So
yeah,
people don't even do that but in life and in the bedroom as well. They're not explaining. If they're not enjoying something, they could explain, instead of saying, I don't like it when you do that, they could say, oh, I really love it when we do this. Can we do that again or something? But sometimes people have a issue with verbalizing it.
Yeah, it's not just verbalizing, but it's the language behind it. We're not taught the language behind our own pleasure. So again, that just amplifies the fact that working with your own body first through sexual and non-sexual pleasure is the key, because you get to experience, what do I actually like, right? What actually feels good. And then being able to find the words and to explain that to someone else is a whole nother ball game, because it opens up even more of that vulnerability aspect. Yeah.
Sorry, Mick, I interrupted you.
No, it's gone in a different direction and I love it. So you've talked about like having the attitude of no guilt and shame, right? So where do you think it is very strong though? People would feel like, I can't say that I love it when you do that, or open myself up to this because I'm a whatever, or I feel like I'm a like whatever these words come from, or whatever they're thinking. Where does the guilt and shame come from, do you think?
A lot of it is learned behavior. A lot of it is that we simply don't have the knowledge. Think of sex ed, right? I don't think any one of us, anyone I've ever spoken to, has never had a proper sex ed that also incorporated pleasure and the correct anatomy of their own bodies. Okay. So especially as women and as men, we start to get these ideas through society of how we should look like, what sex should be, right? How long it should last, and like all of that. So we already have these skewed interpretations going into our sexual experience from a really young age of what sex actually is. So I believe that when we start to experience that sex is not, what porn portrays or what your friends told you, that all of that stuff comes up. It's like, oh, my genitals look like this. I must be, something must be wrong with me. Or on the flip side, men are thinking like, I have to perform, right? So that creates a lot of anxiety. And then that can also create sexual dysfunction and things like that. So what I would say is like, notice it's arising and then peel back the layers. How do you actually feel? Is there fear arising? What's behind the fear? Is it sadness? What's behind the sadness? Is it anger? Right? And then we start to peel back maybe where it's actually stemming from, right?
Yeah. So you're breaking through a lot of this conditioning that we all have. We all have conditioning, right? So you're breaking through that conditioning by really focusing the attention, like through Tantra, on what's actually happening and replacing anything that's maybe negative or not happening with, you know, pleasure and enjoyment and taking some of the guilt and shame. So it's like hyper focus on what's happening and taking control back.
Yeah. And it's not about fixing or dissolving. It's about simply changing how we view, how we perceive what's actually going on. Right. And that's that again, that really amplifies the fact that there's no shame or no guilt or for what your choices are. Right. It's really that, hey, now I have the power and the ability and the knowledge and the tools, right, to start to perceive this differently. And that happens so naturally. It's not something that I see really it being like a conscious thing. It's kind of like afterwards, clients will come to me and be like, you know, wow, this happened. And, you know, I can't believe it. And then, you know, I can bring up the reminder of how maybe they were experiencing that in the beginning of our sessions. And then it like kind of clicks, right? Like, wow, like this is really working. And it's working in such a way that it's tangible, right? For everyday people, the tools that I'm giving people are not, I'm not saying, hey, you need to be a monk and go meditate on a mountain, you know, for years out of your life, right? It's simply that it can be tangible and pleasurable, all while incorporating your sexuality.
Okay, so it's not either or. You're saying, no, it's you're all of these things. So you can use that. Yeah, gotcha. Wow.
Yeah.
That must be very freeing for a lot of people, even just hearing this as well. You know, very freeing to go, oh, wow, because we do hold so much shame and guilt. That's a very freeing, which opens up to, I guess that's, you know, you talk about purifying. That's what purifying is, isn't it? It's taking away some to be open as an open vessel. Not clean. It's about just being open and releasing that. So,
there's another reason why we work directly with the genitals too, and sexual pleasure is because in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, we believe that we store memories from our past lives in our sexual centers. So, for example, there's other lineages of Tibetan Buddhism that don't incorporate sexuality. The energy system ends at the navel, right? So to me, that is telling me that perhaps could be a documented trauma response where whole religions, whole spiritual institutions have taken on as being this ingrained truth, when in reality, it's a trauma response because you're not incorporating all aspects of yourself. And I'm not dissing or saying those things don't work, but it makes you question, right? Why is it that the energy body in this lineage ends at the navel and this one doesn't, right? Yeah.
Well, I know so many people that, you know, they were raised that, well, boys get told something like, don't masturbate, you'll go blind. Or that it's dirty.
Who said that?
Touch yourself.
So many jokes.
Yeah, not to touch yourself, or like, I know girls that were raised that they have to put a cream on themselves, on their vulva or something. They'd have to use something, couldn't use their hands because
you could use an applicator.
An applicator, you know, like things like that, or because they just weren't taught to, you know. I was grateful in the fact that I remember my mum telling me to get a mirror and have a look at everything down there so you get to know your body, and I thought that was really cool. But people don't really talk about that kind of, I don't remember having pleasure as a discussion, but I remember sex ed and putting condoms on bananas and stuff, but I remember learning about intimacy and connection or anything interesting like that. So I'm very aware, and we have teenagers now, and talk to them about give and take and connection. And so you brought up you said porn, and that was my question. I wasn't even going to ask a question. I was just going to say the word porn.
So was I. That was going to be my question. When there was enough blank space, I was just going to say porn.
Touch on that. Just say the word porn, and we love your opinion, because I'm seeing a theme at the moment of empowered men that I know in my space. There's that 3 of them talking about porn addiction and how they're helping other men or women overcome it, and use their sexual energy in a more productive way. So I'd love to know your opinion on porn.
Yeah. So I would say porn, the word addiction is very strong. Okay. So if someone is truly addicted to porn, it's going to be affecting all parts of their lives nonstop, right? So if that's not happening, you're probably not addicted to porn. You're just relying on porn to experience more sexual pleasure or to get aroused. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I think that there are more conscious avenues of things like erotica that are really arousal inducing. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're human beings, and, we have to see something, hear something, or feel something in order for that system to start to turn on, right? That sexual excitation system to start to turn on and tell us, now it's time to have sex, right?
Yep.
Very few of us can be just like turned on like that. It's possible, but usually there's something happening in the background that is building up to that point, right? So there's nothing wrong with porn inherently, but it becomes the intention behind it and I guess the want. What's the want behind, or what's the desire? What's the intention behind watching porn, right? Is it because you're relying on that, or is it because it feels fulfilling? A good indicator is, how do you feel after you watch and masturbate to porn? How do you actually feel about it in your body? Are you feeling drained? Are you feeling shameful? Are you feeling guilt? A lot of times when I talk to men, they feel extremely guilty afterwards, right? So that just tells me that there's something a little bit deeper going on there. Maybe if they were feeling more fulfilled intimately with themselves in other ways, more connected with their bodies in other ways, maybe the porn would just be a little addition here and there, or maybe they wouldn't, maybe it's not serving them anymore, and maybe that's not something they need any longer, right? So again, it just really goes back to how it's affecting your life, how it could be enhancing or enhancing your sexuality, or going in the other direction of really not filling you up.
I think from what I've heard the men discussing regards to porn is especially with young teenagers, and so when they watch it from a young age, they think that's what sex is only, or the performance issue would come from there, like like how you're supposed to look, because of course most of the men in there would be well endowed. Like, how do I explain this? The women are all like perfect and pretty, bleached, and that's what they expect to see, and they think that's what people want. And then also, there's a lot of places like Pornhub that have been on trial at the moment, and getting banned because of all the underage and illegal porn. So there's the energy behind that as well, of people actually being aware of watching the vibration that it's putting out. And as well, so, from that aspect, it's like, that's the education our kids are getting at the moment, because they can just look it up so easily. So
I'm happy you mentioned that, because unfortunately, because of the lack of sexual education, that is good sexual education, where we're really, really going in depth to our anatomy and maybe how, different areas of the body that experience pleasure, erectile tissue, that's all really, really big part. And So what I see is from a young age, if someone is, especially men, just learning sex through porn, what happens later in life is they develop sexual dysfunction as a result of that. Because in porn, it's training your nervous system to tighten, to go really, really fast, and then it's like over with, right? Yeah. And everything is on just like overdrive, right?
Yeah, it's
and
just
as we know, as we know, in order to have extremely pleasurable, fulfilling sex, a lot of the time is to slow down, right? And being able to last a lot longer. And because it's so deeply ingrained in the nervous system, what happens is I'm going to get a little bit more sciencey here, but the ejaculatory phase and the emissions phase are glued together, right? So this is where semen retention techniques come into play, where men can learn how to orgasm without ejaculation, for example.
Wow. That's cool.
Right.
So it takes a lot of dedication and practice with specific tools that are the correct tools. Please do not Google semen retention. I've heard many men have come to me and said, I did this and it didn't work. That is why, because if you try to learn that from YouTube, it can be quite dangerous, especially if your energy body is not primed for it. Okay.
Yeah. So you talked about, like, what's the point of just skipping ahead? Like, of course, people just want answers and things straight away.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's embarrassing to speak to someone. It's easier to go on YouTube because then you can do it by yourself. You don't have to talk to anyone about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it
well,
doesn't
it's a
work.
good thing there's people like me who do this for a living.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's important.
And they can
You're not
meet
going to be
you
embarrassed.
like this and have this connection and understand that you're a person too, and you have all the knowledge, so you know what you're talking about. It's not just some weird sexual thing. You're not going to go. Yeah. They're not going to a class and you go, okay, whip it out. We're going to teach you how to masturbate and hold it in.
Well, I don't know. Are you?
Is it? No. Do I make you blush?
That's a no. That's a no.
No, these are all practices that people can do in the comfort of their own homes. And then, we have a check-in, like what's happening, what's going on, can we troubleshoot it, right? I'm not saying that I would never have in-person, workshops or something like that, where there was some kind of self-pleasuring being involved, but there would definitely be some prerequisites to that, meaning you need to work with me for a certain amount of time or something along those lines. So that's another big thing in the Tantra world, is like jumping straight into a sensual massage, and people think that's what Tantra is. And it's not. It can be quite dangerous to just have some random person who calls themselves a Tantra practitioner touching your body and moving energy without you really noticing what's going on. And also that's kind of giving away your pleasure to someone else. Like, hey, you're responsible for what I'm experiencing right now, instead of taking that power for yourself, saying, no, I'm responsible for my pleasure. Now we can harness that for healing, right? So very, very different.
People offer yoni and lingam massage, like as a practice to help them heal trauma. So is that something you're saying that you're not really a fan of because you're giving away your pleasure to someone else, or are they teaching them so then they know how to help themselves at home? Like,
well, it can go both ways. So for me, I would have to be working with a client, and it differs practitioner to practitioner, right? What are your preferences? What are you comfortable with? But for me, I'd have to be working with someone for a long period of time before I just offer something like yoni massage. And that's actually would go against the code of ethics to just straight out be like, this is what I offer. So that's not something that I explicitly offer at all. There are somatic body workers who do offer genital touch, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it just, in this world of spirituality and sexuality, there's a lot of people that take advantage of it. And then there's a lot of people who really know what they're doing and are really, really helping people thrive in their sexuality. So of course, there are practitioners who offer lingam and yoni massage. That's not something that I would personally recommend starting right off the bat with. But if you have some kind of control over your energy body, maybe for example, you did a membership or a mentorship with me, and then you wanted to go to someone else to have more of this, say you don't have a partner, right? And you're really craving more of this intimacy and connection with somebody else, you know, they can go and see another practitioner or somatic body worker who offers something like that, as long as it's in alignment with what, you know, they're experiencing. Yeah.
So it's not an opener, and if it is an opener, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Like if someone
Unless
says,
it's
hey, we're
just what
doing
they're
some
after.
weekend thing and there's going to be a whole lot of massage and, you know,
Yeah.
that's a red flag. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
this conversation. People are learning so much because they would just assume things, and this will be, you know, this is a great conversation so people actually understand more about what it involves. And because I know, I've seen somebody who offered that kind of massage, and she had a whole bunch of screening questions that they had to fill out first. I just thought, imagine, massage therapist, and I've had, you know, call every other week of somebody.
There has to be some kind of trust built between you and the practitioner, because there's an energetic, you know, cycling. Yeah, it's happening between you and the person who is transmitting this energy and this healing, right? Whether it's through words or touch, right? Sexual touch is something that is way more what's the word I would use? Way more energetically
charged.
Yeah, exactly. Energetically charged. So someone who's just flat out offering sensual massage, genital body work or whatever, that's a huge red flag, because for yourself too, like, hey, why would you want to just go and let anyone touch your genitals in the first place? It's like you have to build a relationship, some kind of practice behind whatever, you know, whatever body work thing that you want to pursue. So I think that, definitely that's a big red flag if there's someone calling themselves a practitioner solely just offering that.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, there's like, from what we've discussed, like there's so much connected and there's so much involved in how it affects your entire life, but it takes so much focus and attention and practice so that you can have that attention on those things. You know, this kind of thing being offered as just like a straight up thing doesn't even make sense. Because it's like you might as that's kind of like porn, I guess, you know, where if you're having an intimate sexual experience, you know, there's time and there's space and there's enjoying being in that moment. Whereas porn is just like, I want to get to the end, right? So, you know, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's you're not spending that time. So is a lot of Tantra really focusing particularly with things like intimacy, whether it's with just yourself or a partner, that focusing energy into that moment and what's happening? Is it like a tool to do that?
Yeah. So one thing about Authentic Tantra, when we were just talking about the elements in the beginning, is that you can start to learn how to harness the elements sexually as well, which I don't even know how to put it into words, how powerful that is, because you're working with lineage-based Tantra. So you are pulling from the wisdom, the medicine of all of the other people who have practiced using the 5 elements before you for thousands of years. So it takes some time to get to that point, but because you now have this awareness of where each element is, you can visualize it, you can, you know, right off the bat, know what's happening in your energy body. Like, hey, this is arising for me, my air element. I'm going to chant, you know, yum. That's a seed syllable for air, and try to remove this blockage, right? So you can work in real time with the blockages that are coming up through the Tibetan 5 elemental practices. And it's extremely powerful stuff. Yeah.
It sounds like a beautiful way to increase and grow your spiritual connection. If you want to use spiritual practices or be a healer of some kind of psychic, it's a beautiful way to tap in that in a natural way, whereas people wouldn't have thought that this is something that you would do. Everyone just focuses on the crown chakra and the third eye.
Yeah. So, we're working directly with the physical body, the energy body, the spiritual body, all the bodies, right? In order to find that alignment, to discover more of ourselves through that process, in a really pleasurable way.
Beautiful.
Understanding one side helps you obviously understand the other side of things as well. And it's obviously not for everyone. But then what is the purpose and the role of abstinence in spiritual practice? Because I mean, that's in everything. It's like you think of a monk or something like that, but it's not just that. They practice that. Even Hindus can practice that as well, and Buddhists. So what's the role of abstinence then, if sex can be such a beautiful, intimacy can be such a beautiful thing?
I'm so happy you asked that, because that is a really, really big thing that I even see a lot in the West and spiritual communities, a lot of talk about abstinence and being able to raise all this Kundalini energy because you're not having sex and letting it deplete. Okay, there's a lot to this piece. Okay.
Cool.
First of all, working with men versus women, completely different energy bodies in terms of releasing, right? So men, you release semen, right? So you're actually emitting some form of energy, right?
Yeah.
So women on the other side, they can harness whatever sexual energy they want. It's limitless, to be honest. So for me, when I think of someone wanting to practice abstinence, is that, again, a trauma response because you want to numb out from experiencing the fullness? Is it something that somebody said was the right way, and now you think you have to do that in order to achieve consciousness or spiritual realization? And a lot of those thoughts can stem from the Vedic philosophy. A lot of my time spent in India, my questions went unanswered about sexuality. I'll just say that. Because it's just not talked about. So in my opinion, sexual repression actually creates sexual obsession in most people.
Yeah, we've seen that play out many times, unfortunately, in a lot of sexual abuse in small towns and things in Australia. We have a horrific history of sexual abuse in small towns, by churches and priests and ministers and things like that. But I'm sure that's around the world. So another documented trauma response, abstinence can be that. I think that it can also, if someone's energy body is not ready or prepared for that type of extreme, I think it's extremism for a lot of people, it can drive you crazy in a really bad way over time if you don't know what to do with the sexual energy that's being built up through time, right? And again, it's not for most people, but it might be for some. Maybe there's somebody who has experienced some form of Tantra to the fullest extent they possibly can for many, many years. And they had, a consort, and then they were married and they did all these, maybe that's a thing. And then they want to say like, hey, I want to try this out. Abstinence, let's do it. Let's see what happens, right? I don't see that really happening, but it could work for some people. And then a lot of times what I've also seen when people, especially men, start to practice abstinence is their body wants to release the built up energy, and they'll have wet dreams because of it. And then they feel guilty and shameful because of that. So it's like, right? So, there's a lot to that question, but I really believe that our sexuality can be a spiritual path.
I love that.
So,
because you're not ignoring a big, important part of our life as being a human being, and that it doesn't need to be science, it can be spiritual as well. Because I mean, sex ed for us growing up in schools was just a science class. So, you know, it was good, but it was a science class. It was nothing too much about intimacy or anything like that. And to be fair to our teachers, just looking back, oh my gosh, shout out to Mr. Wiltshire. You did pretty well, to be honest, with us as a class. Yeah. So do you really see, though, that because of this and because it's kind of separated as well, we don't really talk about that, it's really kind of animalistic, you know, focus on other things. Are you saying that in most cases, in your opinion, you think that in most cases where there's abstinence, it's just a mask for repression?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And where there is actual abstinence, it's probably such a small percentage of something so specific because it goes against nature. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
If anyone listening or watching has had that experience or have tried that before accidentally or on purpose, because they're not in a relationship or something, and I know a lot of women just go, sex, what is that? That's what are you talking about? Because they don't even practice it themselves. But so I know that they say, like, when they haven't had the experience of sexuality with anybody for a certain amount of time, they kind of don't crave it or don't think about it anymore. They kind of switches something off. That means they're obviously practicing themselves and connecting with themselves, but they're just like, whatever, I don't need it anymore. I just feel like my heart and everything just pines for them, because I feel like they're just missing out on so much of this beautiful, juicy, wonderful energy that they could be using for their daily lives and their creativity and their just that get up and go kind of attitude. To me, it all stems from there. So I feel like they're just missing this really important part by just going, I don't need it.
So like giving up is something different again to repression, isn't it?
Yeah,
like repressing something is like a force. Giving up is just like a
I forget where I was going with that, but it just made me think of people that just say, so they don't, I know women, so men might still masturbate when they're not in a relationship, but I know many women, they just don't do anything. They're just given up on that part of themselves, which is sad to me.
Yeah, missing out on so much juiciness and even all the health benefits of orgasm and sexual pleasure. I mean, it's all there. And I think that what you said, Michael, is another trauma response where maybe they had a relationship where the sex was so unfulfilling. Maybe it was painful. Maybe there's a lot of irritation happening. So when they're not in the relationship anymore, it's like, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Right. And that's simply that's not the best way to look at things, because whatever is being repressed in our sexuality, because I believe our sexuality is our deepest core wounding, in my opinion, we miss out on so much healing and so much pleasure, just because we simply believe that we can't experience it.
I'm just thinking so many people had different upbringings of how things were explained to them or not, and not sure what's okay and what's not, and you don't know, like, you know, people talk even about just orgasm as well, like not even sure, is that an orgasm, like personal sharing again, but I know it'll help people listening. Like, so
was that it?
in my marriage,
good question.
I thought I was having orgasms, but until I actually had one, I was like, oh, that's whoa, okay, what have I been missing out on for like what? And then I taught myself how to have one, because I realized I used to stop myself because I never experienced it. I get to this point, and then it was like this weird overwhelming feeling, and I would like stop, and I didn't know how to finish it, and I didn't the comment. So I was like, oh my God, when I actually had one for myself for the first time, I was so excited. I messaged my partner at work and told him, and he was so happy for me.
Yay! Yeah, there's
like,
a couple things I want to. Yeah,
please,
love it.
Was that comment good? Because then I won't feel really weird.
No, I love everything you said. There's a couple things I want to say about that. The first thing, you're not the only woman who has ever experienced a resistance towards orgasm. Yeah. Now, that is an indicator that there's something there about giving up control. Because when you're in that state of pure open expansion of orgasm, you have to let go to a certain extent.
No wonder,
right?
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
And I just want to say that any peak of pleasure is orgasm. So sometimes we tend to simplify it, boil orgasm down so much to the point where it's like, it's either this or it's not an orgasm. And that's simply not true.
Okay.
So for men, usually the only type of orgasm they're experiencing is ejaculatory orgasm, right? Okay. And for women, usually
or mowing
they're experiencing
mowing the lawns perfectly. There's something in that when you look and the grass is perfect. Like, anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Either or.
And yeah, and then for women or people that have yonis, usually they're experiencing clitoral orgasm or clitoral induced orgasm only. Okay. Now, women can experience over 15 different types of orgasm, and men can experience over 10 or 11. So that really starts to open us up to this pure capacity that we have to experience pleasure. And it's not just one type. Okay. And it's not one size fits all. It's going to look different for every single person. But a lot of experiencing more of these orgasms and more of these different forms of sensation is, again, unblocking, dissolving the trauma that's stored in the genitals themselves. So for women, the G spot holds a lot of emotion, holds a lot of trauma, especially sexual trauma. Mm-hmm. The area of the introitus, the opening to the vagina, for example, that's going to have usually numbness or pain because of forced entry or because she wasn't aroused enough before there was penetration being involved, whether it's with a partner or even a toy or even fingers, right? It takes anywhere between 25 to 45 minutes for a woman to become completely engorged.
Yes.
And for men, it's, you have all this juicy erectile tissue too. So, it's contrary to belief. It's not like men can always just be like, boom, I'm turned on. Let's do it. Sometimes there needs to be that slowness involved too. So again, as we slow down, we start to become aware. Where is the numbness? Where's the irritation? What is the feeling arising from massaging this area of the body, touching this part of my genitals, right? What's actually arising for you is your cue that there could be something stored there, something blocked there that could then be starting to dissolve by layering sexual pleasure on top. Does that make sense?
Amazing.
Yeah. So to find these different forms of orgasms, does that take like you to be more curious or open or let go more, or
time? It feels like
time. Like what helps people to like explore these things? How do they explore it?
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to figure out all the other types of orgasm? Like, that sounds like a challenge to me. I'm on it.
The biggest piece of advice I can say that you can start incorporating right now is to simply slow down and do not rush, no matter how much you want to get to that climactic point that you're super familiar with. It's to slow down and don't go there quite yet. So whether that's lasting a little bit longer, or whether for a woman it's just slowing down and feeling more of the sensual experience, that's going to be one of the biggest things that you'll be able to start tapping into what's actually happening within my genitals. So for example, if you're a woman who just goes straight to the clitoris for all of the stimulation, for all the sensation, and for the entire orgasm, step out from there, explore the whole vulva, explore, everything involved, the outer lips, the inner lips, the external erectile tissue, the clitoral legs, the clitoral bulbs. There's all really good stuff before you even go internally, right? And for men, it's the same, massaging the entire pelvic region, massaging all of that good stuff, not just focusing all the attention on the head of the penis where most of the sensation is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
instead of just going for gold. I'm just thinking of all the parents that are like, what do you mean? I just sneak it in quickly on a Sunday morning while the kids are still in bed. Like, I don't have time for 3-hour long session. Like, it's making time for that when you do have a kid-free night, or you're not rushed trying to go to work and looking at the clock and think I got 15 minutes because you're just thinking.
You can have Tantra quickies. You can have Tantra quickies through your whole day. It could be 5-10 minutes. You're laying in bed and just caressing your body. You can touch your genitals a little bit, but maybe you don't get super aroused. That's okay. You're experiencing pleasure, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just going to make your day better. Maybe you'll come back around to it later on, because you're going to have in your mind like, oh, I was experiencing this pleasure this morning. I wasn't able to, take it any further, but like my body's telling me I want to go a little bit further this evening or tomorrow evening. And like, I'm going to do that. Right.
Then you'll be glowing all day and you just have this great energy about you, and it's just building up over the day. I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's given, I'm sure that's given plenty of people to go, okay, I can do that.
Some ideas. Hopefully people are going, okay, and thinking of how they can, have those little teasers with your partner as well around the house, just building up. And even if it doesn't end the way you expect it to at the end of the day because you are too tired, you can still, it's building up for the next day, and just like tickling yourself, feeling your skin, whatever you like, it could be just the shower running on you, all different things, and the little teasers and snatch kisses and little cheeky touching over the day when you bump into each other. You can still be present in those moments. Intimacy doesn't have to be just when you get to bed at the end of the night after a busy day.
Yeah.
Just taking that time to acknowledge your partner and connect with them and touch them, and is just a beautiful way to make them feel wanted as well.
Yeah. And if you're not in partnership, you can do all of that for yourself too.
Love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful. Any more questions? I think I've loved this conversation.
I'd like, for the interest of not going for 2.5 hours, maybe we'll have to have you back on again.
Get to your story of how this even happened. Like, how did you get to? Can you actually? Now I want to ask you, just to summarize this beautiful conversation, what brought you to become a Tantra teacher?
Yeah, because obviously you've worked your way through and found your way back somehow.
We'd love to know.
Yeah. Well, my journey kind of started in India, where I thought, I'm going to go to India. It's like the birthplace of enlightenment, or, spiritual whatever. So I went there to do a yoga retreat. And very soon I found that there was just something a little bit missing from the curriculum through the philosophy behind what I was learning. And that was sexuality. That was pleasure. Where does my sexual pleasure fall into this? Because, even from a very young age, my sexuality was something very prevalent. I, was masturbating at a very, very, very young age. And I think that's completely normal, right? So I think from a very young age, my sexuality was already playing a really pivotal role in who I was going to become. So I asked lots and lots of questions and got my fellow students on board with asking these questions. And we all, no questions were really answered.
Yeah, India's about Kama Sutra, isn't it? Like that's rather than Tantra.
Yeah, Kama Sutra can be it's what I've seen. It's really not something that's widely practiced. More so, it's something that attracts tourism to certain shops and,
I bought a Kama
labels.
Sutra book when I was in India, just because the pictures were really cool.
Yeah.
I don't understand any of the writing.
Yeah. And and it's not Tantra. So a lot of people actually will mix those two up too.
Yeah, nothing like.
Yeah, I think that one thing about the Kama Sutra is I think that that's like erotica, right? It's
there.
So yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool description of, for thousands of years, people have been harnessing erotica and looking at, pictures and things like that, drawings and paintings. So anyways, so going back to India, I remember going into a bookstore and buying a really horribly written Tantra manual or something like that. And I remember reading the whole thing, and it really spiked my interest. Like, basically, it was saying that you can harness spirituality through sexuality for healing, right? Even though the things that were written in it were just like, didn't really make sense, or were not things that I would necessarily recommend. It really got my juices flowing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when I started to dive more into my interest in Tantra, again, like it just wasn't clear. Like, I wasn't even sure what Tantra was. There wasn't books that were written specifically about that I could find about specific lineage of Tantra that actually practice sexually as well. It was either you're on one side of the spectrum of Neo-Tantra and it's all about sex and sexual positions, or you're on the other side where it's about celibacy and harnessing your sexual energy and doing that. So like, I knew I needed both. So yeah, long story short, I came across the Institute of Authentic Tantra years later, after having a lot of unfulfilling sex and a lot of trauma and a lot of my own stuff, that I just knew I needed to move through, but I didn't have the tools to do, right? I didn't have the tools or the resources to know how. And when I found the Institute of Authentic Tantra, everything in my being was like, this is it. This is what you need to dive into in order to just go really, really deep into your being a sexually sovereign human being, because that's what was really driving me. And right before I found the Institute of Authentic Tantra, I fell into being a stripper, and I was an erotic dancer for a while. And that was how I believed that I was going to harness my sexuality and start to weave in my spiritual principles. Now, there's some women that can do this for a long, long time. I was not one of them. I started to feel very drained from it. It was not fulfilling. I did learn a lot from that experience, so much. It was so much fun. And yeah, I really loved having that experience. But at the end of the day, it was like, man, there's something missing here. I feel like I'm almost aggravating the issue of over-sexualization in our culture to a certain extent. So I was like, what's the other route I can take? So when I found Authentic Tantra, I dove into that. It was 2.5 years or something like that of this program. And then in the meantime, I was also becoming a transformational therapy practitioner. So now I weave both of those into a 6-month mentorship where it's all about holistic healing. So we dive really deep into the body, to our sexuality, and into the subconscious mind. So we hit all these points.
Fantastic.
And then just go up from there. Yeah.
Love it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. I can see how it would work so well dealing with the subconscious, because so much of our conditioning is making up our mind of our perception. So giving them the control back and the power back, and then going into Tantra is just incredible. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great, and I love that people can do this with you online.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So around the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, I work with people all over the world.
That's awesome.
Wonderful. So what's the best?
All your links and stuff. Sorry, tell us your best way to contact. We will share all this in the comments and everything, so they can see how to find you.
Yeah. The best way to message me is on Instagram, and you can see all the goodies that I post on there too. Some tips and tricks and fun things. My Instagram is Ava, AVA, .Ashe, ASHE. And then you can always reach me on my website to see my 6-month mentorship program. And then there's also a 6-month mentorship program for couples at www.flamewithintantra.com. So flame, FLAME, within, WITHIN, Tantra, TANTRA.com. That's where you can find me the best. If you have questions, you can always email me, but the best way is going to be Instagram, or you can also find me on Facebook if you don't have Instagram.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. You can just see, like I know so many people listening, they're going to be very excited. You've done all the work, you know your stuff, and you definitely would hold a safe space for people that are interested to learn more about themselves. And mentorship sounds like a really wonderful idea. And just following you on social media would be great. I know I've already started following, just been loving your posts already, if you're spamming a little bit. So I've been loving the comments and the things you share, which is really beautiful. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your time with us and helping to just raise awareness around Tantra and sexuality and self-love with our listeners. It's really important topic, dear to our hearts, and we're really grateful to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
That's it for another episode, but that doesn't have to be the end of the conversation.
Feel free to leave your comments on our YouTube channel, or for those podcast listeners, you can email us at mickandthepsychic@gmail.com to leave your feedback or questions.
I'm a certified hypnotherapist and timeline regression therapist. If you wish to contact me to explore the source of an issue you're facing, just book a session at hernhypnosis.com.au and include the promo code MATP for 10% off. You can contact me on Insta and Facebook at hernhypnosis.
Check out my website at optimisticxavier.com.au if you feel you'd like to connect with me as a psychic medium, spiritual mentor, or intuitive coach. Include the promo code MATP for 10% discount. You can also find me on Insta, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
We look forward to connecting with you again next time as we attempt to leave no stone unturned.
Bye.
All right, cool. I reckon that should be okay.
Yep.